Today's episode is brought to you by Expona 2020. America's largest high-fidelity audio show takes place April 17th, 18th, and 19th at the Renaissance Schaumburg Hotel and Convention Center near Chicago, Illinois. Plan a trip to the Windy City this spring and sample over 200 listening rooms of high-end audio equipment and explore the latest in headphone hi-fi in Expona's ear gear experience. Tickets are available now at AXPONAdotCOM. That's www.AXPONA.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by SCHIITdotCOM. SCHIITdotCOM designs and builds audio components made in the USA. Based in Valencia, California, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIITdotCOM or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Occasional Podcast where we talk all things high fidelity. The part-time audiophile crew and myself are all getting packed up and ready for the Florida Audio Expo coming up very soon, February 7 through 9 in Tampa, Florida. Embassy Suites by Hilton, Airport West Shore is the location. We'll be reporting on all the news and everything. And if you want to see show coverage, go ahead and check out parttimeaudiophile.com for all that good stuff. That's where we'll be posting. But also, very important, check out the Occasional magazine, which has our year-end roundup up right now. In a few weeks, we will have a new issue of the magazine up on the website. You get to that just by going to the drop-down menus, going to the Occasional magazine. You download your PDF copy right there. Super fun, super great stuff. And thanks for listening. On with the show. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. The Occasional Podcast, episode 9 of season 3.
That's right. 2020, baby.
Ooh, here we are.
New year.
Sonus Faber is our interview today. CEO and President and CEO Jeff Poggi and William Kline. A great little interview. I love these guys. I love what they had to say. A very interesting perspective into kind of a two-part interview, right? So the first part is the overview of what it's like to run a company. And then William comes in with some really great down in the roots kind of advice and tips for listening and how they kind of do things on their side. So a really cool one. So stay tuned for that. But first, in news this week, guys.
What's going on,
Oh,
Hunter?
man.
What's going on out there?
I guess the big news that came out before CES or around CES. AudioQuest's parent company called The Quest Group acquired Golden Ear Technologies. So according to the company Facebook page, Golden Ear is joining Bill Lowe's The Quest Group, but Sandy Gross' engineering team and the sales team will all operate Golden Ear as its own separate brand.
Like it. Golden Ear. It's a great name.
Yeah, it's Golden Ear. Mm-hmm. He's got, and you know, if you guys are familiar with Sandy Gross, he's been around for a long time. Yeah. So the merger.
We've interviewed him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point. If you want to check out our interview with him, I think it's in season 1 or 2.
Yeah. Hit the search button. You'll find it.
It's in there. Yeah. And we did a great review of him. So he's a very interesting character, long history. And now he's joining the Quest Group. Bees, what you got on the news front?
Oh, well, right up my alley. So this morning, I pop up, all my news beats, and apparently I've been doing a lot of Beatle searches because it just came out that Abbey Road, the highest-selling vinyl LP of the decade,
wow.
2010 to 2020. Good job, millennials, coming and finding some music. I just think that's astonishing. It came out 50 years ago. Now, our longtime listeners know that we did a whole podcast about Abbey Road.
The re-release.
Yeah, a few weeks ago. So, yeah, go check that one out as well. So, I don't know. That brings me great joy. Abbey Road is, like, my favorite album. I know that sounds cliche, but it definitely is my favorite album. It just brought a smile to my face. So, there you go. So, thank you, everybody out there, for buying your 10th LP of Abbey Road.
For reinforcing his notion that he has perfect taste.
I am cool.
Let's not go that far. See,
but can we just talk about how amazing that is that a band that broke up in 1970 has the best-selling album for this decade? That's insane. That's really insane, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like someone had to take the mantle.
I mean, if you would ask me, I mean, I guess it's the vinyl that really pushes that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Britney Spears, like,
Yeah.
or NSYNC or something. I guess that's a decade before. Who are the big players this year?
Well, I also wanted to say, did you know that vinyl sales exceeded? I read this online, not verified, but I read this online. Vinyl sales exceeded CD sales for the first time
Since CDs have been around. That doesn't surprise me. Who buys fucking CDs? Nobody.
Well, certainly not. When I go to Best Buy, I'm like, where are all the
No.
CDs? There's nothing.
And when you go to Amoeba Records to sell your shit, they're like, you can keep these CDs, bro.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, it's very select few because everyone had such a huge library. You know,
Oh.
the vinyl's a little more far between. Plus, it's in demand. So,
Plus, of course, it's cool.
yeah,
It's cool. Look, I always, give people a hard time, but it's cool. If you go to someone's house
yeah,
and they have a little hi-fi,
Right.
and they bust out a record, I'm always like,
it's always fun.
you're cool. I'm like, you're not lame.
No, it's and usually they're putting on something good because
Yeah.
it's I don't just say in the air, Alexa, play the Frozen 2 soundtrack, which is my life with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Be careful how loud you'd say that, or it's gonna start to play. We don't have licensing for that beast.
But if you're putting something on vinyl, there's thought that went into it.
Yeah.
You had to get up out of your chair, and which is a big deal nowadays.
It is. Getting out of the chair is harder and harder.
It is. The older we get, for sure. Congratulations, Sir Paul and Sir Ringo Starr, on more money.
They needed it. I think they were really.
They were. I mean, they're trying to catch the Queen, so good luck with that.
And then onward to CES 2020. I got two little news items for you guys. The highlights: one headphone, one loudspeaker. JBL introduces the L82 Classic bookshelf. So this is a throwback to the L100 that came out a few years ago. It has a Quadrex foam grill. It's a classic kind of looking floor center. Well, now they have a bookshelf, and the grills come in orange, blue, and black. It retains the same 1-inch titanium dome tweeter as the bigger brother, the L100, and includes a front panel high-frequency attenuator. I like that. If you want a little more treble, a little less. 8-inch woofer this time, front-facing port, $2,500 a pair. Stands for $250 a pair, and if you buy the orange and you want the black for when the parents come over, the initial grills are $200. So that baby is due out in April, and this news item, I put it out there, went viral. There's a lot of likes. I mean, hundreds of likes on this Facebook thing, and then quite a few comments saying $2,500 was
Too much.
ridiculous.
Do you think it's ridiculous? What are your thoughts on that?
Man, I don't know. If it's the problem I think people have is that they're pricing it on nostalgia, just like you were saying. They know you. They know what you're going for, and like, oh, this is so nostalgic. I have a little bit more money. Same speaker, 5 times the price. They think that they're getting taken advantage of because it's obvious the marketing is tapping into the nostalgia. Look, I haven't heard the speakers. They could be good. They could be like amazing, or they could have been underpriced the first time around. But I haven't heard the speakers.
What were the comments online?
One of the comments online was, "I could build the same thing for $200," and I just want to add to that. That may be true.
Is it true?
I'm not. Like I said, I know the parts cost for this particular item.
That sounds like a stretch to me.
But when I hear that, it harkens back in my mind to the woman from The Simpsons that goes, "Will someone think of the children? Will someone?" It's like everybody always says that, right? When people start talking about cost, at least in the Facebook comment section, someone always says, "I could build that for so much cheaper." Yes, you could, but would you be able to market it, sell it, pull the R&D? I mean, the total sum of the cost is more than just the parts. And there's a lot that goes into
the science and technology. I mean, there's.
So, like I said, I don't know. But they look cool. It's hi-fi, so things are expensive. But maybe we'll get a pair in and we'll see. Maybe we'll do one and we'll be like, debunk it. We'll be like Mythbusters.
We really could build this for $200. We did it.
And then for the headphone guys, Audio Technica always has a ton of stuff that comes out around CES. It's like their thing. Also, there is a wonderful presenter. I think the best presenter I've ever met in my life that works for them that I see on the CES floor every year. And Bees, you were telling me once too that they actually will hire like professional actors just to do corporate presentations.
Oh, 100%.
Because
Yeah.
they're that good and that polished.
I mean, you ever been to an auto show? I mean,
I have not actually.
Well, I mean,
does everybody go to auto shows?
No, it's just that auto shows. I mean, that you're selling something you can sell really high end stuff. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I mean, kind of like this hobby as well. But yeah, you got the money, babe. These people come out.
Yeah.
They'll pitch your crap.
So, anyways, I digress. But anyways, Audio-Technica has 3 wood-based audiophile headphones. ATH, that's the headphone starting point, right? AWKT, AWAS. That one's AWAS. I like that. AWAS. WP900. Made out of 3 different types of wood. I'm going to butcher these. Kokatan, striped ebony for $1,899. Asada Haruka.
Ooh.
Ironwood, $13.99. Flamed maplewood, that part I can get, $6.50. So those are the varying price points. Yeah, maple sounds good. I'm a little hungry for pancakes right now. A new high-end IEM called ATH IEX1 for 1.2K. So that's like a high-end IEM for them. All with detachable cables, balanced or single-ended, and then a new sport headphone with a 4 gigabyte built-in player for $159 called the Sonic Sport ATH Sport 90 BT, due out in spring 2020. That one I find interesting because if you don't want to like carry anything else, sometimes when you're running, you just want to be free of everything. This thing's like less than $200 and it'll play 4 gig of music. I find that interesting out of like all the other ones. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Sonus Faber, gonna be a good one. Jeff Poggi, William Kline, Bees,
Punch it.
Today on the show, we have 2 very special guests, Jeff Poggi and Will Kline from Sonus Faber. Thanks so much for joining us. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us, Brian.
Doing well, man. Appreciate it.
So we usually kind of kick off the shows with a history into the background of the personalities that we have. But with this particular brand, I think there's a really interesting story there, a really diverse kind of history with the Macintosh Group and Sonus Faber. Can you just kind of give us from way back how the company started to the best of your knowledge and where it kind of weave through the different iterations and that thing?
Yeah, I love it. So actually, Sonus Faber started 36 years ago, 1983, in the beautiful Vicenza, Italy area, which is a Veneto region, eastern Italy. And the company was founded really with the tradition of musical instruments, the fine violins and violas of Stradivari and Guarneri, and that lute-making tradition, where Sonus Faber said, how can we use all of those wonderful lessons and knowledge of how these musical instruments create such beautiful natural sound and actually apply that to loudspeakers? And so it's really kind of an interesting DNA or origin story of the brand to have that. And so though that origin story sort of gave birth to a lot of the core things that the brand still represents, with all of the natural woods, the strings that we use, the leather that we use, really the natural materials, and you'll still hear us, and we'll talk more about this, of our natural sound, which is sort of our core DNA of what we try to produce. So that's really where the brand came from and still exists. And today Sonus Faber is still a nice small company. We're under 50 people. We produce all of our loudspeakers in our factory in Italy. We have some really amazing skilled craftsmen that do all this stuff by hand. We are now part of the Macintosh Group. Macintosh Group consists of 4 companies. We are Macintosh Labs is one of those companies, Sonus Faber, of course, and then Audio Research and Samico. And so those 4 companies are together as a group, but from a group structure, we really operate them pretty independently. So everything for Macintosh is designed and built in Binghamton, New York. Everything for Audio Research is designed and built in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Sumiko is our distribution company and does some phono cartridges, and that's also in Minnesota. And then we have Sonus Faber in Vicenza, Italy. And so even though we're part of a group, really all 4 companies are pretty independent. They have their own sales, their own marketing teams, their own financial teams. So really the group consists of only a CFO and a couple of presidents like myself and Charlie Randall. So very thin group structure, and really we focus on letting each of the brands be themselves, right, and do what's right for the brand.
When you said that everything is custom made, I just want to ask a quick question. Are the drivers, do you guys outsource to like companies like ScanSpeak and that kind of thing, or do you keep it all in-house for the drivers?
So all of our drivers are actually designed by our acoustics team. So we take design responsibility, but we have them fabricated for us. Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to say on the note, so that is the reason for the string grill in the front, is it's a homage to acoustic instruments.
Exactly.
It is. I never knew that, and I think that's so really cool. From my experience, I have to say I really dig the natural sound and the aesthetic design that you guys have achieved. The teardrop shape, there's just a lot of great design elements for the industrial design perspective, and I very much appreciate that as well. I think that we talk a lot about sound on this podcast, but these things are a thing of beauty. They look the price. When you get to the audio level, you see that, and you know that you're in like a cool house, and you see that kind of delivery on both sides of the scale. Okay, so you have worked for a bunch of different companies over the years, Harmony Kardon Group and Bose. When you kind of look from a top-down perspective from where you are, what do you think is different from managing an audiophile company, audiophile brands, than your typical like CPG company or something else along those lines? What makes it unique? What are the challenges, and where do you kind of think the successes that you guys have seen are?
Yeah, it's really an interesting space because working for large companies in the past, like Harman, which was an $8 billion company, and Bose, which was a multi-billion-dollar company, both global with huge resources at your disposal, but also huge bureaucracies at your distraction, creates a different dynamics for a company. One of the things that I learned along the way, especially at a company like Harman, who has many brands, is how do you manage a multi-brand portfolio? Mm-hmm. And so, coming to the Macintosh Group now, one of the key learnings that we really applied was let's let every brand be their own brand, right? We don't have any engineers that are engineering products across brands. We want to have, the engineers be true to the brand they are. We want to have the marketing people be true to the brand they are. And that really allows each brand to then say its own song and have its own space. And we think that's really important because we're in a high performance space, right? And we're in a luxury space, if you will, or a higher price space. We don't compete with the mass markets. You don't find us at Best Buy, or you don't find us at Media Mart in Europe. You find us at specialty retail. We're not sold online. So the core decisions that we're making about each brand, having its own territory that it can compete on, is extremely important to luxury brands, to premium brands, right? You have to be unique. You see other, interesting analogies when Ford bought Volvo or Jaguar, right? All the disasters that happened with those wonderful brands because they tried to manage it like Ford, and that's exactly what we don't want to have happen. So that's really important to us. And we even apply that to retail, right? Some retail stores carry one of our brands, some carry two, some carry three, but it really doesn't, we're not looking at that as a group requirement. We're trying to figure out what's right for every individual situation, whether it's a distributor or a dealer, and make sure that we're making brand level decisions as opposed to group level decisions.
So ultimately, what do you think is the benefit of having everybody under one umbrella in the group?
Well, the benefit is that we have diversification at the top level from a revenue, right, and a cost perspective, is that, each brand can ebb and flow, right? You can launch products, you can, right, where you have, more revenue. Sometimes you're investing in products. And so we're able to make financial decisions that allow us to be more consistent and stable over the long run, as opposed to an individual brand, which will go through its own cycles, right? So you can sort of level things out a little bit better. And that really helps.
And just to say from my experience interviewing people in this scenario, that when you're a smaller brand and the price points are very high, the R&D can be such a big dip before the valley that comes up that it can be a little scary for a lot of people. And that's a really interesting point that do you guys intentionally line up your dips and peaks across brands?
Well,
we strategy?
We purposely build our investment portfolio at a group level, and so it's not critical for any one of our brands, to hit all of their numbers in any month or any quarter, as long as the group is executing, right? So we can allow brands to breathe, right? They can have good times, they can have tough times, and it also applies geographically too. It helps with geographic diversification as well as product diversification, and so it just makes us financially a much more solid and stable company, which I think in our space is really important because it's also important for customers who are investing $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $50,000, $100,000, right, in our products to know that the manufacturer is going to be there in 5 years, in 10 years. We're in a very solid financial footing, and there's a lot of little companies or little brands, that could be gone. And so, when you buy one of the products from our brands, you can have the faith and trust that we're going to be here for a long time. Macintosh has been around for 70 years. Audio Research has been 50 years. Sonus Faber's 36. So we have longevity to us.
Would you say that the brand itself is looking to acquire more, or are you guys pretty good where you're at in terms of the portfolio?
We're pretty happy where we're at.
Because I was wondering if maybe one of those requirements is this deep heritage. You're looking for these big brands. It would be accurate to say that you're not really in the game to pick up a small little thing or even a medium size. You're looking to just kind of build brands that have really long histories, because obviously Sonus Faber and Macintosh are two of one of the longest brands out there. So
yeah, we're just looking for each of the brands to basically add new product categories to be able to expand our offerings in new spaces that we haven't competed in. And of course, each brand is starting from a different position, so they have different interests in that expansion. With Sonus Faber, we've made a big effort to move into the custom installation space. So for the first time earlier this year, we announced our Palladio collection of in-wall and in-ceiling loudspeakers at a couple different performance levels. That's really important to us. We've also announced a Gravis line of subwoofers. And so, we're looking at each of the brands to sort of just find new ways to compete, help grow the business organically over time.
Just to give kind of an idea of scope, when you develop a speaker like the Audio, your recent flagship that came out, was it like a year ago or two?
The ETA 2, yeah.
Yeah. What is the kind of timeline for that development, and how much, I guess, without saying numbers, is the amount of money that you have to pull in to something like that proportional? Because obviously the speaker is a luxury item; it's very expensive, and people often ask, how can this speaker cost so much? And usually the response is the R&D is a huge chunk. Can you speak at all to the size of scope of what that development process is like from a financial standpoint? And
yeah, the development timeline for one of our loudspeakers or our families is about 2 years. Now, I say that, but it really it's a broader answer than that, because when we develop a loudspeaker and we're looking at each of the individual technologies within that loudspeaker, those learnings then apply to the next one, right? So when we develop the latest AIDA 2, there's a lot of pieces of that AIDA, the DAD tweeter, which is our technology that we use on Silk Dome tweeters, the voice of Sonus Faber, our Paracross crossover, our Ultra Stealth reflex port, our zero vibration transmission. There's many of these technologies that all flow into the new Olympica Nova that we're just launching here today. And so you get the benefits of the investment sometimes when you do the flagship products for the first time. And then as you're working on the next products down the line, what you're looking at is refinement and price point performance optimization, which sometimes can actually be harder for the engineers, right? It's almost easier to do €100,000 AIDA loudspeaker than it is a $5,000 bookshelf, right? It's sometimes that engineering know-how and the experience to get the performance out of that lower price product with more constraints is more challenging. And so we're able to sort of take that engineering investment, which is it's a 2 years of investment of a full team, plus all the tooling that's associated to it, plus the testing and validation and verification you've got to do to sell it. So it has a pretty good sized bill. The good news is we're able to sell a product for 5 or 6 years, right? So you do have some time investment to sort of get the payback on it.
When you think about the life of the product life cycle, is it solely based on sales, or do you have a time in mind from the history? So I used to work with some companies. They would look at the arc of sales very, very carefully, and they'd be like, okay, well, how is this trend going? How long is it going to last? Can we project it? And when is it going to bottom out? Then we got to renew before it goes too far down. So what factors kind of determine the product life cycle for you guys?
Yeah, I think there's some rule of thumbs, right? So if I use like automotive as a parallel example, cars are generally replaced every 6 years, right? 6 or 7 years. They do a mid-cycle halfway through it. And so all the automotive makers will sort of plan their engineering efforts over time to have that sort of refresh. I think in our business, the way we've looked at our portfolio, it's sort of similar. So we're looking at, for a passive loudspeaker line, it's going to have a 6-year life, roughly, right? Some may have 5, some may have 7. The flagship stuff may last a little longer because it's a much bigger investment, and you also need to have the innovation and technology in order to justify the reason to do it. And so that's the general rule of thumb. But of course, you're going to look at the market reactions. You're going to look at how things are going and adjust, plus or minus a little bit around that. But we have a small team, and we also have the practical reality of we want to do our best job on everything we do. So we're not going to try to do too much at once, right? We want to have a full focus, a full energy, and a full commitment to developing the product. And so, if we can do one full collection a year, then that allows us to sort of get on this about once every 5-6 year refresh cycle, just based on the way we've got our price points. And then you still have some capacity to do some of the special projects, which are kind of fun. Like we launched our Heritage Collection, our Electa Amateur 3 last year. We launched the Minima Amateur 2 this year. And so bringing in some of those interesting products that are really core to the brand, add a little bit of salt and pepper on the food. Right?
That's good. Have you noticed, or is there a segment of people that just want the best? And is that something that you guys keep in mind or even actively target, of a person who is like waiting for the next best thing and then they just go? Or do you find most guys at that level tend to just follow this 5 to 6 year cycle? I guess my question is if someone's got the money to buy these things and it's not like a thing to them to buy the really high end, the best, don't they just get the best every time you produce one?
Yeah, there's definitely people that would like the best and they always want the best, but we don't do anything purposely, to sort of just go after them. And we really want to develop a product that we think represents all of the brand attributes of Sonus Faber and does our brand the best. We're much more interested in beating ourselves on a regular basis than we are in anything else. And our biggest competitor is ourselves, right? We want to make our own products obsolete. And if we do that, then we think we're bringing the right value proposition to other people.
The people that buy the best, these gentlemen, what are they like? Generally, what are they like? Are they eccentric? Are they like, are they like Steve Jobs? Yeah, are they like Elon Musk? Are they just like average guys? And when they purchase something that high end, do they just come in and make a split decision, or are they nerds about it? What's it like?
So obviously, it runs the gamut, right? You get lots of varied different regions, different income levels, different occupations, and there's not going to be any one particular stereotype I think we could put on folks that are buying our reference products. But one of the things that might surprise people is I've set up stereo systems that literally cost more than the house that I set them up in. All right, so you do have those people that save up their entire life. They want that next thing. They're looking for that ultimate dream system. And then eventually they get to a point in their life where they can actually afford it and they can actually make it happen. Honestly, in my career, I don't think there's any better joys I've had than having those moments of being able to look at someone's face when they have that investment that they've been dreaming of their entire life and get to enjoy it for the first time. It's mind-blowing. It's earth-shattering.
This question can be for either one of you, but I have a tendency to ask this from different regions in the world. Do the Italians have their own sound in terms of high fidelity audio, or even generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, that question is very similar to, do Italian sports cars have their own feel, their own ride? Yes and no. I mean, obviously, there's certain comparisons you can make, and those comparisons will vary compared to the stuff that's outside of the country in a certain way. Same difference, as it were. But when it comes down to it, Sonus Faber, being a company that believes in what it believes in, that processes things the way they do, you can say that we've had a house sound forever and that we continued upon that house sound, but you also have to have an asterisk on that because you have to take into account the fact that as technology evolves, everything's going to get better, right? So we're actually seeing the differences between the different brands that are out there, and this is true in just about any sector that involves technology. Get it closer and closer together, right? Because everybody's looking for resolution, we can get higher resolution even at entry-level products. Because everybody's looking for more dynamic range, we can do that, again, even on small bookshelves and entry-level stuff. Because the technology evolves, it allows us to give the attributes that people expect for a certain price point across the board. Now, what's different about Sonus Faber, and I think what makes it unique, and it is very much a part of the Italian culture, although I can't necessarily make comparisons with other Italian speaker brands, is that there's a certain sense of what a sound recreation should be, right? And we always talk about being able to recreate sound, the idea of fidelity, the idea of having truth to the original event. But really what we're looking for when we go to a musical event is not the sound. The sound itself is nothing more than a conduit for the experience and for the emotion that the artist is trying to portray. So as we're making every single product, everything that goes into it, every technology we develop, we have to keep in mind that we're not just creating sound. We're trying to recreate an emotional event, an experiential event. And that has a lot more to do with being able to perfectly tune and calibrate all of those different technologies that we've mentioned to be able to best portray the fidelity of your emotion, the fidelity of the experience of being there. And again, the sound is really just a conduit to get there. It's the means that we have to make that happen, but our ultimate goal goes far beyond that.
In that same vein, and through the process, I've asked people this time and time again, what do you want your speaker to sound like? What are your goals? And generally speaking, the answer is pretty much the same. Do you feel that the audiophile sound is a singular goal for everyone? Or do you think that a lot of high end is about preference and we shoot for this particular sound? We hope that people agree with us, but is that ultimate goal that we never, actually reach the same for every speaker manufacturer?
Yeah, so I'll give you another nuanced answer. When it comes down to it, there's going to be certain aspects that I think most people who listen to music will appreciate from a sound system. And I mentioned a few of them. You want clarity, right? Distortion is almost never good, right? So we want as much clarity as we can possibly get. But we also have to be careful because there's such a thing as too much resolution, right? You've got to make sure that the things are synergistically matched so that you're not showing off the detriments of something else that might be upstream in the system, something that might be a part of the loudspeaker. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining the correct balance of resolution, right, for the system that it's going to be used in, for the use case of that particular product. There's another thing like dynamic range. Most people will enjoy an increase of dynamic range. You want to be able to hear as much information from the music as possible. But at the same time, we've got to be very careful that it's balanced with the rest of the attributes of the sound. Otherwise, it becomes too dynamic and it becomes really kind of annoying, right? So there's certain things that we all look for more of, but we have to be careful not to get too much of in relationship, and this is the important part, to the other aspects of the system. So again, it comes down to synergy and balance more than any one particular goal. So for me personally, when I look at a good stereo system, I need the speakers to disappear. I don't want to hear music coming from the speakers. There's a flaw in the system if I'm hearing sound coming from speakers, unless that's exactly where the artist intended for that sound to come from, right? We should be hearing everything from the soundstage, and that's about a lack of distortion. So when we lower the distortion levels to the point where the speakers disappear, then it's what I consider a high-end system, right? And then we can work from there. I need good dynamic range. Me personally, I'm a bass head, so I like nice, not just low, deep bass, but also textural bass that has a lot of information and clarity there, so you can really hear the type of instruments that are creating that bass. And then obviously you want mid-range clarity, you want good sound staging, you want the instruments to maintain their position. Right. You want to make sure that as the frequencies, especially in something that's variable like the human voice, as the frequencies go up and down from that single source in the recording, we want to make sure that they're not transitioning up and down in the sound field because they're transitioning drivers, right? So there's all these little aspects to the overall sound stage that we really want to pay attention to and keep up with, and I think those are important to most people that listen to music. But again, what Sonus Faber really concentrates on more than anything is recreating the feeling of being there, right? And that it's not a spec you're going to see on anybody's spec sheet, right? It's not like realism 1 to 10, it just doesn't exist. But it's absolutely our goal, and I think most people, once they've had the experience of being able to listen to different systems and really kind of going through this journey, figuring out what it is about the different sound systems that really move them, that really make it interesting for them, I think most people will come around to the Sonus Faber sound and realize that this is music.
Maybe to just add one thing to Will's thoughts there is one of the things we really focus on is long-term listenability, which is sort of a core trait of our products. There's a lot of products out there that you can buy that maybe can sound dynamic and exciting and fantastic at point of sale or in a quick demo, and they're like, wow, this is great. But if you actually play it for an hour or two, it becomes fatiguing. It becomes too harsh. It becomes really difficult. And that's, I think, one of the things that would separate us more from many other brands is, and it has to do with the natural materials that we use in our design and construction. And so these are sort of core, but it's also a fundamental core value, right? And that's sort of when we approach a new loudspeaker, that long-term listenability has got to be a key factor.
I sat through a presentation earlier with you guys, and one of the really interesting things I heard was one of the goals you had was to have the speaker play better in more rooms. And now that's not something that makes perfect sense for a lot of people, but that's just not something that you really hear that of. It's not a core goal or something even people choose to mention about their stuff. Like, we want versatility in the space it plays. And it's funny when you said that, because I was thinking that is so important, and barely anybody really touches upon that in their presentations.
Yeah, there's almost no point of making a perfect speaker for an anechoic chamber, right? Yeah. We got to make sure that these are actually working in people's houses, and that's always a design consideration from the get-go. We also have to look at the use cases of each of our different families in our entire line, right? There's going to be a different use case for our entry-level Sonetto than there is for, say, this Homage Tradition. We've got to make sure that those products perform in those environments the best way they can.
Is there any consideration for the amps that on the back end? Are they designed for an amplifier type? Because that is also, it's been said that active speakers are the easiest to design because you can match the amp with the speaker. When you separate out those two things, it becomes a little problematic. Is there anything that that it contributes to the design of those matching?
Yeah, so I think one of the advantages toward that end is that amplifier manufacturers have started to become a little bit more consistent in terms of their output, in terms of their impedance, in terms of their input gain and things like that. So you're not seeing as much of a wide variance from amplifier to amplifier as to how it actually compels and drives a speaker. That said, we always make sure that every model, even down to every driver that we're making and researching, we try it on as many different amplifiers as we can get our hands on, right? So we've got stuff that are not part of our group, lots of different stuff in our engineering lab to make sure we're listening to what this does and what that does and what that does. And then, of course, having access to the entire product catalog of audio research and Macintosh, we can listen to our stuff on just about everything and make sure that it works where we need it to work.
But Macintosh and audio research are part of that process.
Well, as far as providing the amplifiers, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at some of the shared resources between the different companies, though they're fairly minimal. It really has improved and increased, I think, each of the companies in certain aspects. Wherever you aren't necessarily doing the best, you can look at what your brothers and sisters are doing in the other manufacturing facilities and see where we can make improvements. So while we try our very best to maintain unique DNA for each of the brands in the group, there are actually a lot of advantages to us all working together.
So, Will, to me at least, you're the big demo guy. I've seen you. I've sat through many of your demos. All of them, by the way, are really impressive demos.
Thank you.
On that same vein, I'm assuming that you've done a lot of different front ends with the Sonus Faber brand. do you have a preference in amplifiers?
See, my preference changes every couple of weeks because there's constantly new stuff coming out. But no, I'll tell you, I got to start with our brands, of course, right? I'll tell you what I love about audio research, the audio research Sonus Faber combination is the pristine imagery, the ability to close your eyes and really feel like what's happening is happening right in front of you. It's amazing, right? So that's what I really love about those combinations. And it's a very contiguous line. It's very cohesive. So as you go up the audio research line, you're simply going to get more improved sound across the board, right? There's no certain sweet spots where you should match certain things to certain things. The better the amplifier, the better the preamp, the better the system is going to sound no matter which of our speakers you're using. Now on the Macintosh side, Macintosh has a certain sense of authority. Lowest noise floor in the game. And there's a certain smoothness and effortlessness that comes out of Macintosh. It's really kind of unique to that brand. So especially when I'm playing really big systems, Macintosh is known for lots of power, being able to really drive and manhandle those speakers. I really like to use Macintosh to light that stuff up and really show some authority.
And Will, one of the things Bryan just mentioned about the demos, and obviously speaker setup is an important topic to us and something that is, I know, an amazingly important topic to you. So I wonder if you could share your theory on speaker setup.
Yeah, so I guess I've kind of carved out my place here in this organization as the speaker setup guru. But when it comes down to it, though there are speakers out there that respond to placement less than ours do, I believe any good loudspeaker needs to be set up and placed properly in a room in order to get the best performance from it. And that's why we go through great lengths to make sure we train each and every one of our dealers with our specific setup technique to make sure that they know how to take from our very, very entry-level stuff all the way up into our flagships and make them work in as many different spaces as possible and get the most out of them.
So you're saying there's an actual official process for setting up that you train the dealers?
There is.
Can you just give us a brief overview of that, or is it secret sauce?
So it's a step that we've developed over decades. Both the original Sumiko team, which was largely responsible for bringing Sonus Faber and making it successful here in the States, and we did it through the art of demo. As many different ways as there are to sell, as many different selling techniques there is out there. In high-end audio, I still don't know anything more effective than sitting someone down in front of a perfectly set up system and blowing them away. All right, so that's what we try to do. That's what we try to teach our dealers to do. And as far as being able to place a speaker in a room, though, there's lots of different math you can look at, lots of different techniques, golden ratios, law of thirds, fourths, fifths, and all that. Those essentially become good starting points. But at the end, you have to train your ear to be able to find what sounds correct, and you have to have a structured procedure for using the instrument of your ear in its most effective manner. And that's what our system trains to do.
Do you guys generally try to find a single sweet spot? Where do you go in terms of that particular sound, the blow-away position? Is it one place? Is it a whole room? Do you try to go to the back more? Where is that point for you?
Yeah, so quite honestly, while there probably is mathematically a perfect place for the speaker in the room, I have always found that every single room I've set a pair of speakers up in, I can find at least a half a dozen places where I can get them to do what they need to do, right? Now, each of them might be compared to each other. It might be a bit of a sacrifice in one direction or another. Perhaps I'm tuning this system for someone who likes a little bit more dynamic range and is therefore willing to sacrifice some of the mid-range clarity, so on and so forth. There's choices I can actually make to get the best presentation for the particular client I'm setting up for the particular use case or purpose that I'm setting up for. But in most rooms, I can find several places that are close enough to perfect to call them good spots.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking in the context of a show, but if it's for an individual's house where you know where those positions are, obviously you can do those.
Yeah, quite honestly.
But I mean, in this show atmosphere, you have a large room with many seats. Do you let's just say it's a square. Do you shoot for the front middle? Do you shoot for the front back? Where do you kind of aim for that perfection?
Sure. So there are certain techniques that I can do, and this is usually something I'll do regardless of how many listeners there are going to be, but there are certain techniques that I can do during the setup process to make sure that the sweet spot itself is as wide and deep as possible. So I'm getting that, that kind of equal dispersion, that kind of good flat frequency response from a nice wide area to begin with. I'm really not a fan of systems where you have to lock yourself in one place and keep your head still to be able to really enjoy them. We make stuff that can be enjoyed from everywhere. But specifically for a show, especially when we're setting up in a room of the size that we're using here, I do try to make sure that I have as consistent a sound as possible throughout the room. But just by nature of being equidistant from the speakers and having that center position, that's always going to wind up being the best spot, especially for things like three-dimensionality and sound staging. But tonally wise, we try to make sure the whole room sounds good.
Do you have any? This might be a little bit nitpicking, but where do you kind of land in terms of toe in for most of the Sonus Faber brand?
Yeah, so I get asked questions like that all the time. Well, how far should they be from the back wall? It's like, well, I can't really answer that until I set them up and listen to them and see what they're supposed to do, right? So when we're talking about toe specifically, we're not just controlling the dispersion of the speaker to the listener, we're also windowing out the reflection from either sidewall, right? So there's a balance there. There's not just one specific toe that's going to work. It's going to change depending on the materials that the sidewalls are constructed, the distance of the speakers from the sidewalls, and so on and so forth. So it really comes down to the room telling me how much toe the speaker should have.
Thank you for that deep dive into the weeds. I love that. For people who are interested in the Sonus Faber brand, you guys obviously have a lot of product, a lot of price points. Is there a recurring theme that you hear as you move up that product line? What does that sound like? What do you get in essence from moving up the product line? You know, the hardcore question: what do I get for more money? Right? Mm-hmm. And how does that differ from the general sum of high-end audio as those people go up their line?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I could probably answer that one for about 3 or 4 hours. But now, just briefly, with Sonus Faber, as you move up our line, and I should start by saying that our line is more cohesive and contiguous now than it ever has been in our entire history. There really is no such thing as a sweet spot anymore. In terms of value to performance, I think we're consistent from the very top to the very bottom. That said, as you move up our line, starting with the Sonetto and moving upward, you're going to find more resolution as you climb across the board. All right? So there's going to be more clarity, more air and space in between the instruments, more of that three-dimensionality. Certain models, obviously, if we're looking at a floor standard versus a two-way and we're doing apples-to-apples comparisons, those will still ring true. But there's a couple of families that have models that are kind of outside of the normal category of the family that's next to it. So for instance, the new Olympica Nova line, we've came out with a new flagship for that line called the Olympica Nova 5. All right, the Olympica Nova 5 is essentially the third floor stander in this family. If you go up to the family above that, there's only 2 floor standers. Right? So there's going to be certain attributes that we can do with the Olympica 5 relative to the rest of its family that we just don't have in the Homage relative to the rest of its family. Right? So there will be certain spots there where you get in terms of a specific performance advantage that might exist in certain families that don't exist in others. But that said, as you move up the line, you're going to get more dynamics. You're going to get better clarity and resolution, better three-dimensionality. The higher-end models will require better equipment. I think that's something that is important for people to understand, because as you increase the resolution, it's also going to increase the magnifying glass that you're putting on the rest of your system, right? So any flaws in that system are going to start to show themselves.
So true.
So you have to be careful, and that's another reason to have a really balanced, synergized system. It's not just about each of the components individually; it's about how they work with each other and how much of that detail is being maintained throughout the entire signal path. But again, as you go up, you're going to get more resolution, so that does require better level of quality on your equipment. And then as we get up to the AIDA and the Sonus Faber, our flagship models, I think one of the biggest differences there, and one of the things that really attracts people to those particular models, is the ability to render a gigantic soundstage. So if you really want to feel like you're at the third row in the symphony and it's happening right in front of you and the walls of your house just melt away and you close your eyes and you are absolutely there, it's very hard to get that type of presentation when you have that many instruments and that big a sound and that big a space without having some serious size in the speaker. So that's why we have our reference collection that is designed to be able to recreate real spaces in anyone's home.
So there's been a very eclectic demo list in a lot of the demonstrations you've done for me, Will. Do you have any kind of tips in terms of what you find are good qualities for demo songs?
Absolutely. So there's 2 considerations when I'm choosing a demo. One is obviously I want to show the system in its best light. So when I'm looking at recording, and these days there are certain recording studios and certain artists that you can go to and know that you're going to get a good recording. They're very consistent. Diana Krall comes to mind, Patricia Barber. They tend to be, toward that genre, very simple jazz, stuff like that. Almost always well recorded. But we hear enough of that sort of stuff at shows like this, right? So what I try to do is I try to mix in something, that people have actually heard before, but perhaps has more information, more detail, more stuff going on in the track that they haven't heard because they haven't heard it on a high-resolution system yet. So the Lumineers comes to mind. That Hey Ha song is actually really well recorded, right? You hear it on the radio, it's like, oh, it sounds good, but you play it on a high-end system, there's a lot going on with textural information and detail in that track. I really enjoy it. And that's something that most people have heard, just not like this, right? Always got to include a couple of the Motown classics or classic rock or something like that, something that people that are not only familiar with, but have become sort of a theme song at certain parts in their life. Because I think one of the powerful things a good sound system can do is evoke those emotions and those memories that are associated with the experiences you had, perhaps the first time you were hearing that song. So that's always fun. So going back and making sure to find stuff that's well recorded in those genres and from that time period is always something that's important to me as well. So I play a lot of Al Green, I play a lot of Hendrix, I play Led Zeppelin, even stuff that's not necessarily perfectly recorded, because one of the attributes that I like to show off about Sonus Faber, which is completely unique to pretty much any other speaker brand that I've ever worked with at a show, right, is I can play anything through this, right? You can give me the scratchiest, harshest, most terribly recorded music, and there's something in it that will come to life when you play it through a Sonus Faber. Really, really cool. And I like to take demos, which is something that, or take requests rather, which is something that you don't often see at audio shows. Everybody's got their specific demo list. They're going to go through it. It's going to include this track and this track and this track, and it's going to show off the system. I like to make it a little bit more interactive. So I'm always happy to take, if somebody has a piece of media that they want to come in and listen to, I'm happy to play that. I'll play stuff that I've never even heard before. Just throw it at the system and see what happens, right? You're rarely going to see that in audio demonstrations. It's one of the advantages that I get to have working for Sonus Faber. But besides something that's going to show off the system, something that has some sort of a connection with the listeners, I also want to make sure that I go through an array of genres. So I got to play some rock, I got to play some classical. For me, I even got to play some hip hop, especially on toward the end of the show. But yeah, you want to make sure that you hit all the stuff. And then one of the most important things for me, and one of the things I've always got to have in my toolkit, is something new. Got to have something that came out within the last couple of months, something that maybe it's an artist you're familiar with, but you haven't heard the new album. Yeah. Maybe it's an artist you've never heard of, but that's well recorded, shows off the system, and is interesting and fun. Yeah.
I think that the biggest takeaway from that, although there were a lot of really good tips, is that the reason the audiophile themes are so burned out for some individuals is that exactly what you said. They're missing that emotional connection, and it creates a bit of we got to do this thing. And there's just a lot of people online that are very tired of those theme songs, and that's exactly what it's lacking. It's that there's no connection for these people to those songs after a while. I mean, I liked Hotel California acoustic the first time I heard it, but it's that this job has stolen that from me now.
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple of songs that I've lost through the course of my tenure, but it happens. But yeah, I mean, music is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. It's supposed to enrich our lives, and we need to make sure that at these shows we're demonstrating that, not just the systems, not just the sound, but how it can actually affect people and how it can make you better, how it can make your days better, how it can increase the quality of your life.
Anything you kind of want to add at the end here?
Yeah, one of the questions I get asked quite often is, should I buy new versus used? Should I buy this versus that? Should I buy the new one, or if I can find a deal on the old one? Will this work with that? All right, all sorts of questions that would have been taken care of if you had simply gone to a professional and taken the time to pick his brain. Right? I think quite often, and maybe it's the natural progression of consumerism in the world. I don't know, but I think we have a tendency to be reluctant to visit dealers, be reluctant to visit retailers, and you have to keep in mind, especially with the Sonus Faber dealers that are out there, there is a great level of knowledge that these guys have, and that doesn't cost you anything. Being able to pick someone's brain, tell them what your house is like, tell them what your listening room is like, tell them what your music preferences are, tell them what equipment you already have, tell them what you're looking for, how you're looking to improve the sound of your system, and let them guide you, let them create demonstrations for you to show you what the next investment can do for your system. Doing this about 16, 17 years, and I can't tell you how many horribly sad stories I have heard and people I've interacted with that just got completely wrapped around the axle because they heard something was good or they read something was good, so they picked it up, or they found a good deal on one, they put it in their system and it wasn't quite right, so they tried to fix that with something else, they tried to fix that with something else, and before you know it, you're spending more money than you would have on a new purchase for a system that doesn't sound as good. It's really the expertise that matters. It's someone that knows all of the ingredients and how to create a recipe specifically for you, your use case, your environment, your preferences. it's absolutely, it's you can't put a price on that, you know. And I always encourage people, and we've got lots of dealers throughout the U.S. and the rest of the world. Find your local dealer, find your stereo guy, make friends with him. There's nothing more valuable you're going to do for your system. And the biggest question is always, well, what's the most important part? Is it the speakers? Is it the room? Is it the cables? What's the most important part of your system? It's your stereo person.
I just want to say thanks, Bryan, for the time. It's been a very enjoyable conversation.
Thank you guys so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. It's been great.